Hopefully it goes, please.
I got my phone on Facebook Live, Julie. I'll let you know if we're live.
Hey, Julie, are you able to pull up the budget if that comes up?
We are live.
Yeah, I can pull up some things. I'm not real good in there. I could like pull up the reports that were sent out or like the budget document. Yeah, I can. I was just looking at that. I might even have it on here.
For 204 might come up.
Okay. Yep.
All right.
Okay, we're ready. So.
All right. I'd like to call to order the February 10th, 2021 Parks and Recreation Committee meeting. In attendance tonight is President Watt, Mr. Richard, Mr. Bodkins, and I see Ms. Ward and the mayor on. And in attendance, so that's the attendance. Was somebody going to say something? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. If I could have a motion to approve the minutes from the October 14th, 2020 meeting, please.
I'd like to make that motion to accept the minutes.
And I'll second that.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Approval of the minutes from 2020-14 is recognized. And then we have, looks like about 5 items on the agenda tonight. If I could have someone kind enough to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll make that motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, tonight's agenda is approved. The first item up for discussion is freeze fund project discussion. And I would go ahead and defer to the mayor on this because I believe that's what he put on for the agenda for tonight.
It is. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
2 items. One, that while we have not received the letter, the official letter from Freeze Chair Grant Garvrick, Matt did talk to his office, and the number is somewhere in the neighborhood of $454,000 and a few $100s. So that's what we have to work with this year. I think that's a good distribution. That represents, as far as I know, 7/8 that the school already would, that number that we were quoted or advised of is really the 7/8. So they had a pretty good year, and that's good for us. So that's the first thing to report. Okay. Second thing are potential projects, and I think they are ones that the administration will bring to the Freeze Advisory Group, but ultimately they'll come through this committee before they go on to council for final approval. So they're a combination of projects that got furloughed last year and some new projects. Most of them, or most of the dollar value, relate to health or safety improvements. I'll call them, really, it's safety improvements at Pico Park, the softball quad, and also at East Park. And we can talk a little bit about East Park separately, but I think that there is at least an element of a new backstop there that we would like to recommend as a city project.
Easter, did you mean East or Pico for the backdrop, Mayor?
I meant East. I meant okay. Pico and East.
Okay.
So if either adult or youth softball startup at East Park, there's some discussion about that, and or the use of that field for travel baseball, which I think is still something that's going to need to be addressed and accommodated, quite honestly. We need to get those backstops replaced, get a little bit higher netting, and that'll be both safer for fans, but I think it'll also be reduce the nuisance value on the neighbors right there at Pounder and, gosh, I want to say that's Walnut, but I could be goofing up and misnaming the street. So anyway, those safety projects primarily are 2 that we want to recommend and look at. From last year, we furloughed the idea of building a resident, a shelter kind of place at East Park and putting up a new one at Heisey Park. Our vision back then a year or so ago was that the East Park one would be a twin, a modern of the cabin. We're not going to recommend that this year. I still don't know when we're going to be allowed to have groups of people indoors, and so I think committing a lot of money to that's probably not wise. But I think it remains on the future projects list. And then the last project that I think we're going to recommend is an extension to the bike path. Of all the things that we've been able to accomplish, that it remains, it is gives, I think, anybody involved in it a good feeling when they see how frequently people are using that. And there are some plans to extend that west along the back of that subdivision, the Clarendon, and that, gosh, I can't even, McCloskey's another one of those streets, but that subdivision, Glade Drive back in there, from along there and the property line of the Kellers own a farm there. So we've talked initially with Kellers about it, and I think there's a willingness to allow us to acquire some property there. The other thing we're going to do on the 22nd, as it relates to this, is start the conversation with the schools, at least with the superintendent, perhaps a school board member. And the discussion will be about whether they're in favor of, and if they're in favor, how they would like to see the bike path either go through their campus, I'd have to say unlikely, or go around the perimeter of their campus. So, getting ultimately to Pico, in 3-4 years, I think is a goal that has been shared quite a bit, kind of from Pico down to Ammons. So I think those two sections, one that we could build this year and one we will probably study, are that's the immediate list of freeze projects. Like anything, I think I'm probably forgetting one, but at least that's an initial idea of what we'll be asking for or recommending through council, or however that you want to put that. So
this year you're saying, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, I don't, there's probably some other things folks want to do, but those are items that we think should be addressed this year.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
So I want to make one more comment. I'm not suggesting we use freeze funds this year, but if there's an urgent something that we all need to be aware of and we're going to begin planning for, is either a major rebuild of the Heisey Park pool, or perhaps exploring whether or not the replacement of that pool is something that is in the 5 to 10 year range. So there's some items there that I'm not the best person to explain, but we've been patching at those for a few years, and what Nikki and I have been working on is getting a short list of pool architects and engineers, and also pool construction companies, and begin to talk about what we need to do to modernize, or if in the worst scenario, replace the Heisey Park pool. So, we're a year away at least from that, but it's something that's, we need to take a look at. So I did want to mention that. We'll be using some engineering dollars out of 204 likely to do that exploration, explore those engineering options.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Very good. I know that we've had some discussion about the last couple of meetings about East Park. So, Mr. Richard or Mr. Bodkins, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the discussion? I just have a few questions about East Park, but definitely will yield to you both right now if you have something that's on your mind.
Well, I would like to say, even to Tom, I think that maybe if we let them have that for a 3-year period, I believe is what they asked, it would save us a lot of money from having to do any work out there. But I don't know what the plans are. I haven't heard anything about anybody wanting to play softball or anything else. But like I say, I'm not trying to put anybody in a hard spot here, but I think that we need to do something. And I think if they'll fix the park up and do all the repairs, that just save us a little bit of money we could put somewhere else.
Yeah, the only thing I would say in response to that, Ken, is that if it's on that group's shoulders to do all those repairs, they'll do it as they have the resources. When I met with them, that same group that had approached the committee members, it seems like it's been 3 weeks or a month ago.
July.
What we talked about was that their money matched with a freeze request could probably get a lot more done. And the things that they would be proposing to cost share on are things that have a benefit both to the baseball clubs themselves and to the park. For instance, new dugouts, there might be a cost share on that, where the city would put up the frames and that they would perhaps then contract. I really like those canvas awnings that we have at the Splash Park. Those might be ideal covers. So what I'm expecting is to hear from that travel group and perhaps the Galleon Youth Group about projects that they'd like to cost share on. So how that might be better, Ken, is I think we could get the park improved quicker using both city/freeze funds and the private funds. And so that's the reason that we're looking at going that direction.
Tom, I didn't ever heard sharing. I thought this was all on their shoulders. I really did.
Okay. Yeah, it is. That's what they proposed, you guys. That is what they proposed.
Yeah, that's the way I heard it, that they didn't want any money from the city. But I guess if it could work out that way, but I'd rather, if they want it and they wanted to pay the whole bill, that's up to them. Well, if they don't want to do it, then we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I would like to get more done than what I think that private group could do and get the park up and running and looking good sooner than like that 3-year period. But anyways, that's we'll see if they apply for freeze funds, and if they do, we'll revisit it. It'll come back through this committee, and so I guess I'm saying, maybe give it another month or two. We'll see what they propose, and then we'll come back and revisit it.
Okay,
I feel that's very encouraging. I think the one thing that we all can agree on is that we want to see something beautiful. We want to see some beautification down there on that field. And, we've had Mike and Kenny and I have talked in private, and my goodness, we're open to any suggestions. Putting a dog park there with a zip line, getting rid of the baseball field because it's not being used, to the shelter, to bring in a t-ball field there. I'll be very transparent. That is one of the, I'm not going to say hot button topics, but that is something that I'm asked about quite a bit. And if you look on social media, there's a couple of hot button topics right now, not to mention the Freeze Center, first of all, but then East Park is right up there too, along with Kobe. So if we can all agree that, what is currently there is just not acceptable anymore, and let's put our heads together and, in the next month or two, we've got time, the ground is still frozen. But I will say that this baseball club, I do agree with Mr. Bodkins. If we can get a baseball club down there to feed tournaments to those East End businesses, they're talking 5 months a year for tournaments, like 3 to 4 different age groups. And, just talking to these gentlemen, I think that if we do go forward with something like that, it has to be under the understanding, there will be no padlocks put on it, but in fairness to them, if they're going to invest $30,000 to $40,000 of their own money, they agree to upkeep that park. you know, and they agreed to allow other people to use it, they should have first priority at it, you know, if there's tournaments scheduled or whatnot. But I'm encouraged to hear that, you know, East Park is heavy on all of our minds. I know it's heavy on our constituents' minds, along with Kobe and the Freeze Project. So thank you very much. Mr. Richard, anything from you?
No, I just wanted to say thanks, Tom, for the breakdown of the proposed projects that we're talking about for this year. I had heard that the pool was an issue from I think it was mentioned last year, or it's been mentioned before. So I think that's a good thing that we get going with this whenever we get formal notification, and you know, I think that would be a great thing.
And this is the first I've heard. Oh, sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
I was going to say, we'll share the applications. You know, they're just 2 or 3. You can take a look at them before we send them to that advisory committee. I did remember another thing we're going to try to squeeze in, if you will, is the resurfacing of that parking lot at East Park. It's really pretty rough, and we're getting, you know, near close to 20,000 guests out there at the splash park. We're you know, I'm not sure whether we just put a thin overlay, but it needs it, and restripe. So that might be another thing that you'd see on the city's list of potential projects. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing is the bike path has been a real popular thing. I've even seen people out there when we still had rain going on, walking in it in the rain. So I'm glad to hear we're moving forward with the other parts of it.
Yep, thank you. I agree. It's neat to see it used for sure. So
Julie,
anyway,
go ahead.
That's what we got on this year's proposed project. Easy for me to say. I don't know if I mentioned the rebuild of this is a 2020 project, but the rebuild of the primary shelter house down there at Heisey Park is something that is on that list. So if I didn't mention it, I intended to.
Thank you. Julie?
Okay, I'm monitoring the Facebook, and there's some other, but this kind of falls into this area. I have from Sarah. She says, would like to see the sand volleyball courts at Heisey Park moved to safer location for the kids to use throughout the summer. Being directly besides the baseball field, it is dangerous and turns into a giant sandbox for kids watching the baseball games. All right, I do have another one, but I figured
I would agree with that. And I've been down at the park with Sarah. I think that the opening up with the removal of the restroom, the opening up of that area, the horseshoe pits in that area might be an option. But I agree with the general principle. I think people would play much more teenage and adult volleyball if it was in a different location. I absolutely agree.
Just to piggyback off of that, I think those old outdated horseshoe pits would be a wonderful place for a possible relocation for a sand volleyball court adjacent to the pool. And speaking of the pool, this is actually the first time I've heard that the pool, I knew the pool was getting patched up every year and we were having some maintenance issues on it, but if that pool needs to be replaced, obviously I feel that goes to the kind of the top of our priority list for the next couple of years.
Right.
But anyway, does there any other comments on the first item on the agenda for tonight? Julie?
Okay, and the other one, this is from Jim. He said the south side of Amix Reservoir needs TLC, a restroom and blacktop, especially that south side is probably more used than most parks. The parking lots are always full.
Is that what we used? Is that where the shelter is? The south side one where the parking lot and the shelter is and the boat ramp?
Off in the fishermen, the fisher people. That's where they're talking about. I can't, we're unlikely to recommend it, but I wouldn't disagree a lot with that. One of the things we ran into when we got the current Amon's bathroom approved is I'm not sure Morrow County. They basically said, well, we'll approve this this bladder and this holding tank this time. But we really, we may be hard pressed to approve that in the future. So the freshwater and the sewage solution is probably the reason it hasn't been funded over these many years, is that you have to run that sewer line quite a ways for not a whole lot of flushing. So I think if what makes sense is to go back, start with some conversation about, is that the case? You won't allow us to have a cistern, basically a fiberglass cistern and a holding tank, and try to see if we can get that. Then the cost of what's being recommended is, it's definitely one of the the size of project that we've had some success with are these new, more modern bathrooms. So without getting into too much detail, that's one of the frustrating parts of doing what he said, getting, something other than a porta pot back there. So I hope that helps explain at least a little bit.
Thank you. Julie?
Okay, we just had another one come up. Someone asked about the roads behind the YMCA. What about the roads behind the YMCA? Love the walking trail. And, are there plans to expand? So
behind the YMCA?
Well, yeah, someone wants, what about the roads behind the YMCA? I don't know if they're in bad shape, if that's what they're getting at. She doesn't really say. She says, what about
it's real. That's actually Gill Avenue. And at some point it becomes just an alley. So I appreciate the heads up. It is kind of crappy back there by where the one, I believe it's called the Lions Shelter. And then next to it are shuffleboard courts. And then the tennis courts that the Y uses kind of as a play area for daycare. That roadway right there is, it's in pretty bad shape. And yeah, thanks. We'll get on it. We'll get on it.
Julie, are there any more questions at this time?
Not right now, not regarding this topic. There are other ones, but I'm trying to keep them in the topic. So.
All right, very good, thank you. Item B on tonight's agenda is capital bill funding. Again, Mayor, if you'd like to take the reins on this.
Yeah, real quickly, we were, that was put on hold and then was passed very much at the last part of last year. Our request for $100,000 to renovate, rebuild the gazebo area up on the square was awarded. And we're really in the kind of scoping phase. What I'd like to do is sit down with the property owners along, in the square in that immediate area, and perhaps with the chamber, and talk about what they envision being included in that rebuild of Park Square. Real nice article about regarding Mo Taylor and her great skills as a muralist. There is some discussion about whether or not we could have a mural along that west-facing wall. It has a faux brick kind of thing. And as I understand in talking with folks, as the last time when that was turned into a park area, there just wasn't sufficient funds to finish the side of the building. And so one of the things in that discussion will be whether or not we can have Mo or some other artist do a quality mural along there. So that's about what I can tell you about the capital project. It is reimbursable. And when we did the budget, we did not appropriate money for that. So at some point in the next couple of months, it's likely to see legislation come through that would provide the appropriation to spend the money so that we can be reimbursed. And so those are the two things probably worth mentioning about that capital grant.
Is Mo by chance the gentleman that did the Uptown Square in Bucyrus? Would that be one and the same?
Yeah, she's a female, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to, Maureen.
I don't think she did the murals in Bucyrus, no.
Touched them up.
Oh, she touched them up. Okay.
Recent touch up because that guy retired, and she did the one out at the East Park swimming pool. That little jungle, not little, it's neat jungle.
Oh yeah.
And so I mean, heck, we don't have to select her, but we do have some local talent that's done murals, and I'm kind of excited about that being a component of that project. So $100,000 from the state, you know, if we get crazy, we could probably spend a little bit more to capture all the things that people would like to see done up there. But that's the Cliff Notes version of it, Aaron.
Good, thank you. Mike or Kenny, anything to add to the capital bill discussion?
Well, since you're working on the square, I'd like to see them islands go away.
Well, there you go. Make sure whoever's on there, Matt, whoever, make sure Councilman Bodkins knows about this planning, any planning meetings, because I think, you know, you and I might be the only one, but I'm not a real fan of them myself. But that is a place that should be discussed or could be discussed. So
that really messes up traffic at times. That's really a shame.
Well, my rims on my car doesn't appreciate them sometimes either. So
well, if I had a horse, I'd tie him up there.
I bent a rim about 5 years ago on him. So
you'll get an earful. There's a constituency that like the flowers and the big vases there. So I think this will sort of queue up as a good discussion. I really want to include people so we don't run into this thing when it's done. It's like, wow, this is underwhelming. So I'd like to make sure we get as much out of that $100,000 as possible. So that's it.
Mike?
I agree. I think a discussion about those islands is, I have to agree with Kenny and Tom that while they do have a decorative value there for the lack of a better term, safety issue, in my opinion, for traffic. So, I mean, I would not have a problem if they would disappear.
Well, that'll increase audience participation because Julie's probably, her computer's smoking hot right now. There's another point of view, but I think we're better served to have the discussion. And we're not under immediate, we don't have to spend it, get it done right away, but we'll have, I'm guessing we haven't got the paperwork, but probably till the end of June of 22. That's probably the time frame we have to plan, build, and finish out the project.
All right.
So far, I've got one islands need to go. So.
All right. Keep it down.
We've been encouraging more involvement and engagement. So maybe this is the catalyst to get that done. The islands in the square, right?
Yeah.
All right. I think Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton had a song, Islands in the Square. All right. Anything else on capital bill funding, gentlemen? All right. Moving on to C, use of East Park ball field. I think we pretty much hit that in the beginning in combination of the freeze discussion. Is there anything else to add to that? Again, I'm just very encouraged that we all agree that what is there now is just no longer acceptable. That's been sitting.
The other thing that happened, you guys, is the idea of utilizing PICO. And I was under what I would describe as the false impression that on many nights, only 2 of those diamonds are used for softball, and that you could modify another one of the smaller diamonds and play both softball and baseball. Well, nobody wanted to do that, and that turned out to be, you know, a good idea until you put it into practice. After there was resistance to doing that, getting it scheduled, it became pretty clear that the best solution is to get that other ball field so that it can be used and give us flexibility for tournaments you had mentioned before, Aaron, and also so that if we have a couple of these competitive teams, that they aren't competing for field space, that they're focusing on learning the game and competing in that way. So that's where the idea came from. And I met with the Ohio Prime folks and shared the idea of cost sharing. And so we'll kind of see where that comes out.
So they proposed the cost sharing idea, or you proposed it?
It's like, if you guys put up 25%, you can get 75%. And through the combination of your funds, probably spend less of it on the field. We would spend more, and you could do more with your overall treasury by doing the field improvements in conjunction with us and saving the other money for other travel expenses and the kind of things you run into. We talked, one of the things you may see is some discussion about a concession stand and how to put that in that might be a joint, might be a cost sharing item. So anyway.
Well, the good news is that basically the structures are there. So, I mean, that concession stand is in pretty solid condition still, just needs brought back up to code probably and health department stuff. But anyway, hey, I just wanted to real quick before we get off the East Park thing, just commend these ball clubs and working with the mayor, working with me. This all came down last July and August when there was a big push, if we recall, to get that ball field renovated by this club. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that was involved, including Gallion Youth Baseball, the Graders, the Mid-Ohio Prime. They really did work well together in the late summer and the fall to share the additional fields that we have. I didn't hear a lot of feedback and negativity about that. But again, before we move on, by golly, if we're going to have a ballpark down there, let's use it, or let's get rid of it and put something else there that these people can use on the east end of town. So Thank you very much. Anything else to add to that? All right, Mike or Kenny?
No, I don't think so. It's basically until there's another meeting, there's nothing to be said about it.
Right, right. But I feel like this is a lot of progress right now, so this is good.
It's one way to find out if they're really sincere about it is to have money put in an escrow account, and I'm sure Tom will agree with that. At least we know they're sincere. If they put $10,000 or $20,000 away, that's what it's for. At least we know.
Yeah.
That's all.
I will say this though, and I thought about this. Mayor, you said it in the rec committee meeting in October. You brought up a good point about all those houses running down 3rd Avenue across the street. I can imagine that first 13 or 14-year-old lefty that 190 pounds jacks that ball about 400 feet. So if that ball club goes down there, we might want to consider netting a little bit from right field post, maybe to right center, just to protect those houses across the street. That came to my mind too. So that's just something to consider.
Boys, as well. If the Babe Ruth, the 13 to 15-year-olds, I think they'll probably end up at Pico on that regulation field that was built a few years ago. But
nice.
I think what was a little bit tense last fall, I think we're seeing a way to get the field fixed up, and so I'm encouraged too, Aaron. I would agree. Good deal.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to topic number D, or letter D here, the revisiting of the 96 Parks levy for clarification. And I want to start by saying that is not entitled a Parks levy. That was actually entitled the Recreation and Acquisition of Real Estate levy. That was ordinance 95-6139. And I just wanted to bring that back up in discussion for clarification more than anything. I know, and I have found out as I've kind of educated myself on this a little bit, that money has been accounted for in the budget section of 204. I also am aware that just like the Freeze family situation and through the fiscal emergency that our city did go through. If I'm wrong, Mayor, just correct me. But from my understanding, that some of those monies were paid for that purpose. The state auditor did approve that. The only thing that I would just like to say is that I know that we've already appropriated the funds in Section 204 for 2021, but I really would like to revisit for the budget in 2022 for that ordinance that was passed in 1995 to be exclusive for recreational projects and for the acquisition of real estate. And it's not just because there's no specific reason. I mean, the acquisition of real estate, that would be, you know, we're talking about purchasing these old rundown buildings and getting them torn down. That would be very appropriate, you know, for this ordinance as well. But, you know, I remember voting for it. I remember it was an extension of the 91 pool. The citizens voted to continue that. I know that it's generating between $200,000 and $300,000 a year pretty consistently. And I just think it's very important that, you know, we consider the 2022 budget and really putting a special focus on spending those monies in the manner in which the taxpayers intended for it to be. And I'm not saying that it hasn't. I just know that we went through a heck of a financial crisis. We're no longer in fiscal emergency. So I'd like to bring that up and just say, you know, maybe let's reconsider reappropriating that money for those two purposes and those two purposes only. I thank you very much. Kenny or Mike, did you have anything that you would like to say?
You said it all.
Mayor?
Well, Mike, you got anything?
No, Tom, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is, I think.
And you have the budget available.
What you said, I agree with. And how you described it, I think is, you know, accurate. What happened when the state came into fiscal emergency, I think most people recall there were a number of layoffs. There was a decision made, I wasn't here, but the decision was made to have 7 street department employees paid basically through account 201, and that 3 people would be costed against the 204 parks levy, and 1 staffer would be charged against the airport. Okay. You know, I didn't like that from the start, but we were under fiscal emergency.
Right.
So over several years, we implemented, former Auditor Trish and my office implemented the cost accounting process that we use now, in which all of the service department employees charge their time to one of basically 5 different funds. So when those individuals are working in the parks, they do charge their time to 204. Now, I read something before I came on, and it was not, it was a posting, and it wasn't quite accurate. When they're mowing, they do charge for mowing. But if anyone wants to take the time and go back and look at it, there are a lot of hours charged to other park-related activities. It's not just mowing. There's a daily run through all the parks to do the sanitation run, plant the garbage, sanitize the playground and the bathroom equipment. So I would argue, as you know, sort of a fiscal purist, that those are definitely part of enabling recreation. And you're right, the language says for recreation and the acquisition of real estate. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the other hours are things like prepping the playground for the mulch. There was a lot of drainage and earthwork done in building Graders Park. They are instrumental in installing the bathrooms that we've used freeze funds to put in, as well as park funds, because that's the last thing I'd want to say about this issue of are we properly using. We can document, I won't go long at it, but there are a number of projects over the last several years in which we have used 204 funds to go easy, if you will, to ease up on the freeze funds. Okay. Now, when we first started getting our freeze allocation, in other words, when the debt was paid off to First Federal, we established this 25% cost share. So in the early years of us having money for parks, we were using 204 funds as the city's match to our freeze projects. 204 got a little bit tight for reasons that no one wants to sit and listen to. And so council decided to eliminate the 25% match requirement from freeze projects. So we didn't stop using 204 for parks projects, but we used them to they were no longer the match, but they were used to purchase equipment and do a handful of other things. So it is important, I think, to summarize. I am an advocate of trying to minimize the amount of labor costs, hourly, insurance, benefits, all of that, and limit that charge against. But the notion that we are violating the ordinance or somehow misusing those funds, I don't want anyone to gather that impression. Last thing, if you'll indulge me, in the statement that I read before I came on, that the expression was that it's $300,000 a year that could have been used here but wasn't. And it's been that way for 25 years. One of the things I didn't have time to do, but is to go back and look at how much that 0.11 income tax raised in 96, 97, 98. And I know, we all know without having it right in front of us, that it was more like $100,000 and not $300,000. That our income tax because everyone's income has gone up somewhat over the last 25 years, we're collecting a lot more income tax off of that 1-1 than we were back in the mid to late 90s. So I think that's worth mentioning. If the case is that millions have been misused, it's really, I don't know what purpose that serves. And so I want to use the funds to minimize labor cost, and that's why we instituted cost accounting, so that when city workers that were being paid out of the street department were working on fixing a water line repair or working on snow removal, that we were no longer paying them out of park funds. So now when these guys bill their time based on as I said a few minutes ago, the 5 funds that they work in: stormwater, which is cleaning stormwater, street sweeping, leaf pickup. When they're in that activity, they're charging the stormwater fund and no longer charging it back to the parks fund. When they're plowing snow tonight, they are no longer being charged out of the parks fund, they're being charged out of the street fund. So if we want to talk more about it, you want to look at the numbers, I love this kind of stuff. And the idea of making sure the costs are carried or supported by the correct funds. And so a fair examination would show that we've actually reduced payroll cost in 204, in part because of the institution of this cost accounting system. So typical Tom O'Leary over answer, but it did catch my attention when right before the committee meeting, that flashed across everyone's Facebook screen. So.
All right, thank you very much. That's why I kind of brought it up and prefaced it the way I did. My personal opinion is that I would like to see that money for starting in 2022. I would just like to see the word labor and wages disappear out of that fund. And I mean, we have a year if we can figure it out, wonderful. And if I also would like to say, I do not think for a moment anything was misappropriated. We were in a heck of a bind. We were in a heck of a bind in the city system. Like I said, we were liquidating hundreds of thousands of dollars a year out of the Freeze Fund to pay off the bad debt. That certainly was not the will of the Freeze family, but the state auditor approved it. But since we are no longer in fiscal emergency, and I mean, I think we've done a very good job of budgeting accordingly. You know, you said, and I agreed with you when we passed the budget that, you know, there'd be a lot of small towns that'd be grateful to be in our situation that we've got a fully passed budget for 2021. But with that said, let's keep this please in the back of our mind. I really want to see those funds going back to the purpose of recreation. And you know, my personal opinion, you know, labor has nothing to do with recreation, pension, union dues, whatever the case may be. So, you know, with that said, I mean, the budget's already passed for this year, and we do have 11 months to think about how we could get the labor out of that one section out of the 5 that they're paid out of. And I have confidence that we'll all make a good faith effort to make that happen. You know, and I'm going to be very open and transparent. That's kind of how I am. You know, if council does want to move forward with this event recreation center, that could be an additional couple $100,000 a year to add to capital improvements for the parks, because we are going to look at possibly going down to 185,000 a year in freeze requests versus the 4 to 5. I kind of look at it like, man, we could have our cake and eat it too. We could get our rec center and literally not skip a beat for major capital improvements for the parks. So that's really all I want to say about that. Kenny or Mike, Mike, you're looking off to the side like your wheels are turning there.
My wheels are always turning.
Oh, okay. Well, they look like they're speeding up right now.
No, I just want to thank the mayor for the in-depth explanation. I have to say, I do think that it is a wise and decision to do the pay the maintenance of our parks the way it's being done right now. I do think that if there's a possibility of also getting more for projects, certainly, and it has nothing to do with the proposed center that's been being talked about. But I do think that the mayor and his staff and the auditor have done a great job to do what they do for us, as well as the parks themselves. I think all the folks that go out there and, like he said, take the trash out, so to speak, and all that stuff, I think those are things that are related to the parks. And many communities do the same thing. They have funding, they earmark, for lack of a better term, funding for maintenance of those parks. So that's the only thing I'd like to say.
Kenny?
I'd like to say I would enjoy a meeting like this every night. This is the smoothest meeting I've ever been to.
This is the funnest. That's because this is the funnest committee to be a part of, guys. Yeah, we're talking about playing and having fun here.
Good job explaining everything tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, Aaron, just 2 more things.
Yeah, please.
Pissing off people, but one's a small one. When we mow at the reservoirs, because this may come up as people want to get into more of a finer detail. Those hours are charged to the water fund. Mm-hmm. So, that is that we wouldn't have the reservoirs. We use them for some park activities, mm-hmm. but the mowing at the reservoir, which happens with a little less frequency, mm-hmm. but it also includes mowing at the disc golf. Those are being charged against the water fund. That's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider for 2022, and this will, you know, when at the finance committee next week, if we don't charge those salaries against the parks fund, then we'll have to make them, we'll make those salaries up most likely through the street fund, which is largely funded by income tax through the general fund. So what we would do is free up costs in the parks fund, we would increase costs in the street department, and the street department is largely, you know, most of the money that comes in from gas tax we use on materials, and most of the money for salary we get from the general income tax. So something to consider. We would be hitting the general fund a little bit harder by opening up some cushion for 204.
All right.
So
well, you know, I would never propose that with all the chaos that we had with the change in the auditor's office in November. Yeah. You know, we were crunching that budget in. That would have been almost evil to propose something like this at that time. But, you know, like I said, with 11 months of a head start, we got our city auditor in place now. And, you know, so we have 11 months to really try to crunch some numbers and get some things, you know, okay. Like I said, we could just very respectfully just have a cordial conversation, agree to disagree. But I would just like to see labor taken out of 204 entirely. Because regardless if this free center goes through, that's still a couple $100,000 a year for the parks. And there was just a lot of discussion tonight about other projects like roads behind the Y, Amons. I mean, yeah. I really would like to see in the future that money be allocated for the purchase of property or recreation. But if no one else has anything to say, I feel very comfortable with where we are in this discussion right now.
Yes.
Kenny, Mike, Mayor, anything else on this topic? Perfect. All right. Next item up for bid. One of Mr. Richard, I'm going to have you lead this one because you had a great idea, the Colby Park, potential dog park, or the rebeautification of Colby.
Well, actually, this is something that's been talked about a little bit, and I know the mayor and his office have talked about it too. We all know that Colby Park has kind of been
the redheaded stepchild of Galleon for a while.
Correct. Yeah.
With freckles.
With that. And I think that we really need to really do something with it. The suggestion of a dog park came up, and for the lack of anything else really necessarily that might work in that park, that isn't a bad idea. The only thing I would want to add to that, and I hope my voice is not killing my point of view here, but I think that if we were to take, and let me back up. The biggest issue I see for Colby Park is the fact that it has over time overgrown. Mm-hmm. A few years back, Shirley Clark and myself and another council member met with the state, and we met out there and we talked about what we could do out there. The state informed us that the plant life or the undergrowth out there is pretty typical of that type of area. And unfortunately, it is very aggressive. My thought was, and I've mentioned this before, was to take and go in, have a professional team come in, clear that out, at least all on the south side, leave the better quality trees, some young trees, the older ones, clear it out, seed it in grass. I think if we could keep that mode, that the re-emergence of what is there now would probably go away. The other thing is that we all know that we've had some issues with I'm just going to be nice here and say campers.
That's a good way of putting it.
And I think that with opening that up like that, I think a lot of that will kind of fix itself in that regard. And then with the added benefit of putting a dog park in, which I know people do go out there to walk their dogs, then there would be more foot traffic in and out, which I think, again, would also kind of slow that issue down. So,
I think, Mike, are you referring to the tree line just north of the factory there where the old railroad tracks used to run back in the 70s and 80s, clearing out a whole line of trees out just north of the factory on the south side?
No, what I was thinking about was the, if you take essentially from the dam and wrap it around to the far side of, lack of a better term, the pond.
Okay.
Clear most of that out because that is pretty much city property.
Okay.
That would open that all out. You would have vision through there for people to see things. And I think with that, I think people will feel more comfortable being there and be more interested in, going out there.
Well, well, when you and I have had a discussion, I love this idea. I mean, it could actually be a very functional, beautiful park. It's actually one of the more beautiful areas that we have as a park in Guyan with the natural trails back there in the pond. So much potential. But I've always said that word potential has gotten more professional coaches fired in sports history than any other word. So I will just say, but what I envision is a dog park there, extending that road back to when I was a kid through the 80s, right up to the pavilion so we could have a picnic pavilion. I would like to add cornhole and pickleboard to next month's agenda to give us something to discuss, but maybe a couple cornhole boards or, along with that dog park. And that could be a wonderful, picnic area. Families come out, bring their dogs, have a picnic, throw some cornhole. But yeah, I think Colby Park definitely has some potential. And I remember being back there as a kid and my mom would take us back there. It was a wonderful place, back in the day. It's gotten a little run down, it got overgrown, like you said, and campers without campers. That's a good way to put it. Kenny, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Mike said everything that was on my mind, and that's always the overgrowth needs to be taken out and cut all the extra trees down along the water's edge. I talked to only a couple people ever that was afraid to go back there with their kids at night and fish. They just didn't, that's what it's for, is to have a good time.
Right.
So, you open that up, you'll get rid of the element.
I will just say, Julie's going to ask a question on Facebook, but I will just say before I yield to you, Julie, that a dog park is heavy, I think, on all of our hearts at some place and a point in time. It's just finding the perfect location and the right opportunity. A dog park is relatively not very expensive of an investment, and I think it probably could give the biggest bang for its buck. So go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I know. Samantha, which everybody brought, she said, was agreeing with, keep in mind that with activity there, it'll keep the destructive people out and keep people from using baseball fields as dog runs. And then she did go on to say that she cleaned up the trails last summer and cut back the non-native bushes out of the paths and fishing spots. So yeah, so I'm sure it's grown up some since then. And then Jim had said something about canoe rental, primitive camping, fish and fishing, but I don't know how big that is back there, but I could be remembering it wrong.
Thank you. Mayor, I think Kenny and Mike and I have had our say on Colby. Would you like to opine and give us your thoughts?
I think it's the best use for that park. And the comment about getting more coaches fired over potential, that's kind of funny. It's probably true. The other thing I would say is it without being adversarial, these are the kinds of hours that we're going to have to decide how to pay for, because not everyone right before the meeting, I had a nice conversation with some uptown property owners. And you can't talk with those people without talking about what dogs leave behind. And for sure, whether it's up on the sidewalks uptown or it's out at Kobe Park, you're going to have some set of hours going out there and making sure that that the debris, you know, that the dog dirt is clean and it's you know, it doesn't become a health and safety issue for other folks. So
sure.
I think we should make a run at it. And Samantha is for sure the most consistent person about pressure in a nice way on this. She's been pretty patient. I might suggest, and this is not in any mocking way, you never have enough volunteers in a community to help with stuff. And so one of the things that could help the dog park get off the ground is if each one of you contacted somebody that you know is real passionate about it, mm-hmm. and see if they would agree to help us with some drawings. You know, certainly we could pile into a car or something. One person could go take some pictures, but go look at some other so-called dog parks and make sure we don't call something a dog park that used to be a tennis court. There's right. A couple cities nearby that's what they did, and I don't want to do that. Or
a softball field.
yeah, or down at South Park. So really, right. I like the idea. I think that's probably the best use for Kobe Park, mm-hmm. and it certainly is something that between now and the time council looks at either freeze fund applications, or there's another. Without going on, let me look here. It's 8 o'clock. I'll hurry. The Nature Works grants that we have made use of to help us with bathrooms throughout the town and with other projects were put on hold at the same time the rest of the capital projects were put on hold. When the legislature passed that included our Park Square Park, they also appropriated money in Department of Natural Resources for this cost-sharing thing called Nature Works. Mm-hmm. There are 50,000, roughly 53,000 and a few hundred for Crawford County for Nature Works projects. One of the things I'll ask Matt to do is to look into use of those Nature Works for the development of a dog park, fencing, maybe some things for dogs to play on. And, that may help with the financial side, using Nature Works to get this thing launched.
Dog parks are absolutely eligible.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad I thought of that, Matt.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, Mike had a great idea, about the cleanup that's going to need to be out there. I have a feeling there's enough support for this. If we had a Colby Park cleanup volunteer day, I would not be surprised if we had a huge turnout out there with some gardening tools. And, the more that we get the more we get the Galleonites to go out there and take ownership of their park, the less money we're going to have to spend by bringing professional contractors in to clean it out. So I think there's enough support for this that we'd have a really good support system to help. I know I'd be out there helping out. I don't know how effective I'd be, but I can pull weeds. So you don't want me on any heavy equipment, though. I promise you that.
Right. Well, we'll talk about internally and then kick back or share back with council the idea of making the installation of a dog park something that we apply for Nature Works for.
Sweet. We'll put it back on next month's agenda and continue the discussion. Julie?
Okay. Yeah. Samantha suggested to look at the dog park website for Alum Creek, where mm-hmm. they have good rules and liability statements. And then Eric suggested Sylvania Olander Park is the best what it could look like park. So to check that one out as well.
Awesome.
Samantha, if you're out there listening, any kind of, I'd be happy to work with you. Just get a hold of me on Facebook if you wish. or get a hold of me through my city email. It sounds like you're exactly the kind of volunteer that we need to help spearhead this. I know the mayor talked when we brought this up last summer. He had a great idea about, you know, getting volunteers to form a committee to really look into this. And I'm in discussion with somebody other than Samantha who's just as passionate about the idea as well. So, you know, that's encouraging. So if anybody wants to step up and volunteer, that'd be wonderful. The more information, the better.
Yeah, those are both great suggestions of locations that you know, we could take a look at. So
okay, thank you very much. Mike or Kenny, do you have anything else to add to the discussion?
No, not tonight.
All right, I am not seeing anything under other business. After the last few nights, I thank you very much. I think we're ending on a high note tonight. Mayor, did you have anything that you wanted to close us with?
Nope. Let's just keep working at it. The more we get accomplished, the harder it is to get more stuff done. You know, the easy stuff maybe we've tackled. So we just got to keep pushing. And I'm with you. I think we had a good exchange of ideas and time well spent.
Thank you very much. If there is nothing else, I certainly won't object to a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion is adjourned at 8:07 p.m. Everybody have a wonderful week and thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.